10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Good luck, studio.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Paul Chandler, the shy Yeti. He's not that shy.
Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
All I wanted was a pie, and then I hatched out of an egg.
Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
It's the quiet ones you've got to watch, you know.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep? Is it deep?
Oh boy, he's not all that shy is right.
Blimey, Governor, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Excellent.
517.
Hello, campers. How are you?
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Shy Life Podcast with me, Paul the Shy Yeti. How are you doing? I'm all right. We've got Martin back. Hi, Martin.
Hello.
How you doing?
Well, I'm obviously getting younger by the episodes,
Yeah.
which is always fun.
Going back to before you were born.
Back in
and before I was
time.
born. But,
I mean, that one of those spiral tunnels that Owen Allen liked so much.
yeah, yes.
Black and white loops.
Yes. Well, as promised, I think this is probably the first of a four-part series about the pop hits of 1950s. We're not going to do quite as much detail as we have done for some of our episodes. We're going to go back to how he did it in the early 60s, and we're just going to look at big singles on both sides of the pond. But this first episode, well, let's run the theme music, and when we come back, I'll explain what I'm thinking that we'll be doing. All right, run that theme music.
Darling, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Yes, but it's positive thinking. The highlights, the Shy Life.
You won't find a cast of characters like this everywhere.
Hello, Paul.
You don't want Paul now.
I'll go anywhere for a potato.
This particular episode of the Shy Life is a little more abstract than usual.
Oh,
Go Shy Yeti.
Oh, my husband found out my secret. I think he has.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
oh, I can't wait for it to begin.
It's the Shy Life Podcast.
So we did recycle.
Yeah, I am strangely drawn to Yeti Uncle John's ankles as well.
Has the Shy Life Podcast slowed down? I don't think so.
It's all gooey and meaty and yum, 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 yum.
And we're back. So yes,
Hooray!
so what I thought we'd do with the 1950s, well, partly because the chart doesn't begin unless there is some what we know as the charts appears to begin. Why they started it when they did, or whether the system changed and we just don't have the details, or it was called something else, but the chart we know as the chart begins in about December 1952. Why does that?
This is going to be like one of those, when you're watching a quiz show at home and you just know that the person hasn't heard or listened to the question properly and their mind goes completely blank. I'm going to be sat there going, so what are we doing? So
to give it a brief overview, why I thought we'd do this episode, and then the following three episodes. So I thought that
the 64 shilling question.
we kind of what I thought we did, because we do have details from America going back to 1950. So what I thought we'd do this episode is I talk about some of the singles that were big in America in the first 2 or 3 years of the 50s. Then we'll get to 1953 and we'll go through that almost as we usually do. And then in future episodes we'll do like 54, 55, then 56, 57, 58 and 59, and then that will link us back up to where we started with 60. So we've done that. So those early episodes we did of the 60s, we did 2 episodes a year. So we'll until we got to your birth year, and then everything went. It was like,
then the world began.
Well, and also a lot.
Everything before that was just made up. It's only I ever read it in books. I don't think there's any truth in any of it.
Well, in the early 60s, we were finding that so obviously there were big hits, but once you get to 64, like every single song that was released almost is like a massive hit, a massive famous song. So
just wait till Peter Jackson makes a movie of it.
Yes, yeah. But so I think, looking as an overview, I was reading how they were sort of saying, like, how the first part of the 50s was very much sort of the big band and swing, and it was sort of the stuff that had been big during the war, after the war. It was sort of it went into the 50s and then sort of started to peter out a bit, and then
came rock and roll. Yes, but I'm fascinated by jazz. I'm fascinated by how many people really, really say they hate jazz. I mean, really, with passion. And I don't know what it is. Because I've been to a few sort of big band, concerts and stuff like that. And that the sound, when you're in the audience, is just phenomenal. And there's so much energy to it. So, I don't know. I know we're about to head into the era of rock and roll, but the big band sound has got a lot of power and a lot of energy. And I think, it deserves to be loved a lot more.
And there were also things like folk and country and blues and R&B. All these things were sort of around even in the early 50s. And then, as you were saying, rock and roll comes in the mid-50s.
I have an interesting... Well, I don't say it's an interesting theory, but I do have a theory that there's this... what tended to happen back then is that there was the music your parents listened to or your grandparents listened to, and then the kids found something new. And I'm still slightly perturbed by rock and roll, because rock and roll kind of went through various phases. Eventually you had punk and stuff like that for about 20 years, and people found different sort of aspects of it, but it's all been a bit homogenous in recent last couple of decades. It's the kids and their parents and their grandparents are all listening to the same bloody music, and somehow that feels, I still maintain it feels wrong. I feel that no, there should be something else that I can sit in the corner and go, right, you can't make it a bloody word if they're saying. Also, there should be something that isn't talking to 50, 60-year-olds that's really talking to teenagers. I suppose that it exists, I just don't know about it. But you just feel that there should be radio stations full of that stuff,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, this is the thing. There doesn't seem to be, these days, there doesn't seem to be, you'd get sappy boy bands in the 70s.
Well, yes, there is
but you get that. But then alongside you'd have adult, for want of a better word, adult music. But the way the charts is now, there isn't like,
as they say, God gave rock and roll to you. Gave rock and roll to you.
I don't really know who the big bands are. Like, where is this generation's U2, or is that music so, or I mean, to a certain extent, some of those bands are still out there doing that music, just that they have a lesser following than they used to.
Well, I think what's interesting is when we've talked about the 60s and the 70s charts, certainly to a certain extent the 60s charts, there was a lot of the songs your mum and dad would listen to, the Ken Dodd stuff, but the Perry Comos and the Andy Williams were still charting, if you like. Sinatra was still charting alongside the Beatles. And you kind of feel that eclectic sort of interspersing of different eras. I don't know. It's like everything's just rock now to a certain extent. Maybe that's me being naive because I don't listen to as much music as I ought to. But it all still feels like this would appeal. It's like they want to fill concert halls, and they want to fill concert halls with sort of 20-year-olds and 60-year-olds for some reason. They all listen to the same stuff, and I still feel there's a fundamental flaw in that. I think there should be something that says, no, I don't like this, but you do, and that's fine.
But I mean, this does sort of link into the 50s as well, because you've got people like Elvis. But heartthrobs also, a lot of their music was kind of pretty good, and you can you get the Beatles in the 60s with the songs that they did where they had screaming fans can still be listened to. They're not. It's not like they were whereas you get some boy bands that are so novelty that you wouldn't, like we were talking about before about the Puppy Love and things like that. They're so novelty that you would never want to listen to them. That they were only being sung because they were totally about the singer being handsome rather than good material. Whereas I always think that Duran Duran had a lot of screaming fans, but they never. I wouldn't, even their ballads, I wouldn't say they're horribly soppy, or they never did anything that was really sickly. Or I enjoy listening to them, and I was never a screaming fan. But there are other people, perhaps like Take That, and the ones that were around in like Boyzone and all that. Their songs were so sappy that there's no way you would ever want to listen to them for pleasure. They were so much about almost going back to that 70s thing of the of some of the bands in the 70s. Although even bands like Bay City Rollers, I've since discovered did some quite good songs, or quite upbeat songs, or they weren't all about. They did do ballads, but they also did some.
Well, this is it. I mean, the Osmonds did Crazy Horses.
Yes, exactly.
Rolling back to the 50s, particularly, I mean, there is a sense that the 50s is very cosy. It's all sort of jumpers and what was it, Terylene trousers and rah-rah skirts, and to a certain extent. And it has, everybody has very tidy hair, and everybody dressed like their parents and everything like that. The interesting thing, I think, is that post-war Britain is much more austere back then, and much and is doing some interesting things. But the American music is very much, or mainstream American music to a certain extent, is very much of that idea of the house in the suburbs, 2.4 children, big car, all the new gadgets. I mean, we're on the brink of the space age. We're on the brink of the mass consumerism of the post-war era, and of course, at that point, America considered itself top nation, and how could anybody possibly want to live anywhere else, kind of thing. And so their music was very much reflecting a world of success and dominance, if you like.
I think what I found just looking at some of the titles is that I realised that a lot of the songs that maybe I grew up with, I don't know, older aunts and uncles or whatever singing, the songs that they were singing seemed so. I had no idea that they were actually chart songs.
Oh yeah.
Like, I was thinking of things like "How Much Is That Doggy in the Window," or "I've Got a Lovely Bunch of Coconuts," or things like that you'd hear people sing, but you'd never have thought that they. I guess I mean, I've seen them described as they are considered novelty songs, but they were the novelty songs of the. They
were catchy and they had a long shelf life. I mean, and again, the fascinating thing to me quite often is that those sorts of songs that my dad or my mum might have been singing along to, or might have turned up on the radio whenever they listened to the radio, were at that point would have been 10, 15 years old. But of course now they're 65 years. That was 50 years ago, and yet people still know those songs because they are so ingrained in the culture, if you like.
I suppose in the same way as, some people don't like the more novelty songs of the Beatles, like Yellow Submarine or Octopus's Garden. Those were the songs that I really liked when I first got into the Beatles, because they were novelty songs, but they were
familiar as well. That's the thing. But they were familiar because they were very whistleable. They were very, people that requested them a lot on the radio and everything. And certain of those songs were the ones that, the school band would play because they were considered wholesome enough for public display, if you like. Not like some of those bad lyrics from some of those bad singers. There was a wholesomeness which meant that the recorder band or whatever at school could play them, and could play them at the fetes and things, and it would be acceptable. You couldn't really play "God Save the Queen, the Fascist Regime" as a song, when you were opening the Harvest Festival or whatever. But
well, let's go back to 1950, for instance, in America, and the sort of songs that were number one. We don't have to look at these for as long as we will, some of the later ones, but for instance, in January 1950, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer by Gene Autry. Then we've got the Andrews Sisters, I Can Dream, Can't I, for 4 weeks.
The Andrews Sisters, wow.
Yeah.
You see, they would have been huge, wouldn't they? They would have been huge in terms of, because of having their war, you know, they were the Andrews. I'm sure the Andrews Sisters, you know, did all the stuff in the Second World War. I mean, and of course, that at the beginning of the 50s, that's only 5 years earlier, isn't it? That's like it's 2016. That's Jodie Whittaker's arriving times. You know, it's not that long ago, really.
I saw somewhere that they've sold up to 80 million records or something. The Andrews Sisters. I don't know where I saw that, but I can't see it now. But yes,
amazing. Again, very popular.
Then following them, we've got the Amos brothers with Rag Mop.
Right.
And then Chattanooga Shoeshine Boy.
Chattanooga Choo. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if
not
that...
the Chattanooga Choo Choo.
No, that's what I was thinking whether it's connected. But,
maybe one was a spoof of the other. I mean, this is the strange thing that sometimes happens, is that you get a spoof song that actually sort of becomes bigger than the thing it's spoofing. But I suspect it's got nothing to do with that at all. But interesting.
That's by Red Foley. I've never heard of Red Foley. Next up, we've got Eileen Barton. If I Knew You Were Coming, I'd Have Baked a Cake for 2 weeks.
Knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. I think my dad used to sing that.
Yeah. And then we have, this is a big hit, but it's not the longest number one of the year.
No.
For 11 weeks, we have The Third Man theme by Anton Karas.
Crikey, really?
Yeah. But remember,
is that the zither thing?
I guess so. He says it's an instrumental.
I have this vague, I always have this vague sense that they may have made a TV series based on The Third Man. And maybe there was but no, I suppose it's kind of weird. These obscure and bizarre musical instruments that they did instrumentals with. And yet they were really. It's about 10 years later. It's sort of Hank Marvin and his and his guitar, but it's fascinating, really, because really I like The Third Man. I think it's a classic film, and it is an iconic. The tune is iconic, but actually, if you sit and watch the film, it starts to drive you mad after a while, doesn't it? You imagine somebody having that on a single record, and single records in those days were only about 2.5 minutes, so they'd be playing it. You'd have to listen to it about sort of like 30 times an hour, and it'd drive you insane.
I remember I used to have a tape. I don't know if it was how long the tape. It must have been used for something else, or maybe it was a freebie with a magazine, but it was, yes. I don't know if it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It wasn't anywhere near as long as like the tapes that you would be familiar with. And I had the Magic Roundabout theme recorded on a loop on one side, and the Zcast theme recorded on a loop on the other side. I think you could probably have used that as Shiny's water torch if you wanted to.
Absolutely,
wanted to, because they're very short.
Was that you said that was bought, or
no? I made that. I recorded.
You
over
made
what was
it.
I made it. Yeah.
Wow. That's dedication.
Yeah. But yeah, apparently The Third Man is from 1949, so this is relatively. We're in 1950 here, so it's literally the following year.
Oh, yes, what you mean.
But of course, this is America.
Well, again, but that shows you also how because that's it's a British film, isn't it? Third Man, really. But it kind of shows you how there is that delay between something being made in 49 and shown in American film and something becoming enormous.
I just don't know if they didn't. It's frustrating that we don't have UK details from this time, but I don't know what was going on, or whether it's something with more research we could have found out about. But anyway, I imagine there would have been a sort of crossover. But after the Third Man theme, we have Mona Lisa by Nat King Cole.
Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa.
That was for 5 weeks.
Right.
And then this is the biggest number one of the year. for 13 weeks.
13 weeks. It really is a short episode, this, isn't it?
well, we'll be doing more than one.
Quarter of the year. A whole season of Blake 7. Yeah.
Well,
let's talk about Blake 7 for 20 minutes. No.
We need it to be quick because we need to do 2 or 3 years this episode. So,
okay.
We've got, the next one is Goodnight Irene. This is the 13 weeks one by Gordon Jenkins and the Weavers.
Right, and I actually couldn't tell you what that tune was at all, considering
I don't know if it's Goodnight Irene. No,
you see, the tune in my head is Goodnight Irene, da-da-dee, da-da-dee.
I think I'm thinking of Goodnight Eileen, maybe.
Yeah,
rather than
come on, Irene,
I don't know. It's very confusing. But after that, we have Harbour Lights for 2 weeks by Sammy Kay. When is Sammy Kay anything to do with Danny Kay? I don't know.
No, I don't know, but Harbour Lights, that became a TV show, didn't it? It's a title for a TV show, so it's obviously a famous song that I can't picture off the top of my head.
It says here he became one of the most famous of the big band era.
Oh, okay.
Then we have a single called The Thing by Phil Harris for 4 weeks. And this is a novelty song. And Phil Harris was an American actor, comedian, musician and songwriter.
Yes.
He was an orchestra leader and a pioneer in radio situation comedy. First with the Jack Benny programme, then the Phil Harris Alice Faye show.
It's weird because the title rings a bell with me, and I don't really know why. But when you're talking about it now, I'm thinking that sounds awfully familiar, which I don't really understand why it would be. Unless my grandfather used to play it on the organ. I don't really know.
The funny thing is, it says it's probably derived from the English bawdy folk song, The Chandler's Wife. So, it's a goodness knows what's going on.
So, it's a song about your mum?
Yeah. Oh, dear. She was around, but she was only... That's 6. What's she doing? She wasn't a Chandler then.
There might be a dusty copy of it somewhere.
Yeah. Now, the last number one of 1950 in America was by Patti Page, The Tennessee Waltz, for 9 weeks. Another big... There's 3 really big... The Third Man, Goodnight Irene, and The Tennessee Waltz were the biggest 3 number ones that year in America.
But were they all from films, those songs?
Not sure. Doesn't say that...
It's just the Tennessee Waltz, sort of, again, it rings bells with me, but it rings bells with me from film soundtracks, but I can't quite, off the top of my head, I can't quite think, but I just wondered if it was to do with films that became huge.
Doesn't mention of him.
Because we're sort of still pre-telly, aren't we? Really? Yeah. I mean, I know that there is television about, but it's not got the influence in 1950 that it would have even a couple of years later.
A lot of people have covered the Tennessee Waltz, so it's probably something I would recognise if I actually heard it. But
yes, I mean, I do know it. I was wondering why it was particularly in the zeitgeist at that time. If you see what I mean, it's just weird, isn't it? I was dancing with my darling. That one, but I just wondered if it, like I say, if it had a connection.
So next, we're into 1951. We're still in the States. We don't have any English counterpart quite yet, or UK counterpart. So we'll just run through the number ones.
I think you've got to think about this at the time. Is America's cars, huge cars with big fins and white heat and everything, and Britain's got the Morris Minor, and we're all chugging around in grey. Yeah. So there is a difference in the two worlds, very much so. That we buy into.
I did read that before 1952 in the UK, charts were to do with printed music, rather than what was being sold, so that people could play it themselves. That was the sheet music. Yeah. I couldn't think of what the word was. But anyway,
well, my granddad used to have a load of sheet music. I mean, he was a pianist, he was an organist, But of course, when you think about the plot or the main character in Pennies from Heaven is a sheet music.
There's a lot of sheet music about these days, isn't there? Really, but. So,
And I think that's the weird thing, isn't it? Because basically that's what home entertainment, when we're talking about iPods and televisions and all the thing, basically home entertainment was if you had a piano.
yeah. The UK doesn't come in until very late in 52, so
It's all still black
so
and white.
we'll forge on with
and fog.
we'll forge on. But they can't see the music. No, just a bit of here anyway. So the first number one of 1951, although I think the previous one, which was Tennessee Waltz, had gone on into the start of 51. But the first one I have here is Perry Como, If, for 6 weeks.
Is that the same If that Telly Savalas did?
Because that was written by Bread, and that was written in the 70s.
Oh, right.
It is an old...
If a picture paints 1,000 words.
It does seem to be... It says it's a popular song. It's actually called If They Made Me a King. And...
as opposed to If, that film with Malcolm McDowell, Lindsay Anderson.
It was written in 1934 by Roger Hargreaves. Didn't he do that?
Oh, the Mr. Men.
I don't think so, but
Mr.
We're going to
If.
end up down a wiki wonder if we're not careful. But it looks like
Different Roger Hargreaves. Yeah.
Louis Armstrong did a cover in 51, and The Bachelors.
Wow.
But this is the thing. Even if some of these songs were number one, if there was, I mean, people must have been listening to music.
Are we still before the singer-songwriter then? Singers didn't tend to sing their own stuff, did they, at this stage? That there were, like you say, songwriters.
A lot of these songs, I think, will be that sort of situation. Our next one is Mario Lanza, Be My Love.
Mario!
Be My Love, only for 1 week.
Wow.
But, Be My Love is by Sammy Khan, music by Nicholas Bodsky.
Okay, fair enough. These are all people who used to turn up on Parkinson in the 70s.
It was in a 1950 movie, The Toast of New Orleans, and it was nominated for Academy Award for Best Original Song.
Did it win?
When they...
Well, no, it was nominated. It probably didn't.
They would skip to. It won it.
See, I'm not thinking. You've got me on a brain dead afternoon.
It lost out to Mona Lisa.
Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa. That one. Or the one with Bob Hoskins. Talking of pennies from heaven, how weird everything's connected. Wow.
Then our next one is Les Paul. Oh, was he the one with the guitar? Les Paul and Mary Ford, How High the Moon, for 9 weeks.
How High the Moon.
That was...
9 weeks?
So it's a jazz standard, and it was first famous in about 1940 in a Broadway review, 2 for the show. So it had been sung by...
Would we have been in the era of electric guitar by this? Because I think Les Paul... again, it's the picks, actually, isn't it? It's the plectrums I always think of as Les Paul, oddly enough. But I kind of think, well, maybe that was still acoustic guitar and not electric. But you never
I know there was a lot of fuss when certain acts in the 60s went from being like Dylan going electric and stuff, but presumably electric guitars would be...
Well, there's a funny thing if you watch 50s movies. Everybody, army movies, teen movies. Somebody in the room always has a guitar, don't they? There's always some annoying sod who decides to strum up.
We have a familiar name next. We have Nat King Cole with Too Young for 5 weeks.
Too young for 5 weeks, but slightly older by the end.
It was weird. This looks like it wasn't by him, but it does appear to be a new song, or a relatively new song, when it was it looks like Donny Osmond covered it. In fact,
there's cheat. But Nathaniel, presumably.
Presumes.
Nat. Was the king a nickname, or was the king an actual given name?
I'll have to have a look.
Because when you mention him now, I'm always thinking of the king in inverted commas.
Yeah, it says
and I thought he must have really hated Elvis, mustn't he?
It was Nathaniel Adams Coles.
Okay.
So it's coals,
Adams.
not and
Does it have the same
coals,
ring?
not coal either. So slight differences. I don't know where the king came from. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. Look on listeners. You have to look on Wikipedia. There's too much of it.
We can't spoon feed everything.
We've got 3 years to get through here. Although it's not as long as a usual year would be. But next up we have Rosemary Clooney with.
Okay. The aunt of the George.
Yes, it's that "Come On My House." That's I think
she ever sold coffee.
"Come On My House." I think I sort of know that one. That's for 6 weeks, and
Right.
it looks like her version was at least one of the first. Then we have Tony Bennett, because of you, for 8 weeks.
Is Tony Bennett still going?
Yes, I think he's still. Yeah. I think he's done a few standard albums with Lady Gaga. So quite recently, that have done really well in that sort of crossover sort of.
That must be one of the longest careers. Then,
must be.
Surely.
Apparently, that's
Rodgers and Hammerstein.
I can't see Rodgers mentioned. It's Arthur Hammerstein and Dudley Wilkinson. And it was actually a song, when he did it. It was a song from 1940, so it was an old song. But it was used in 1951 in a film called "I Was an American Spy."
There's a film I've never seen.
Now it looks like that song did so well that the next number one was also by Tony Bennett, and that was for 6 weeks. "Cold Cold Heart," and it's a country music song originally recorded by Hank Williams.
It does sound familiar as a title, weirdly, unless it's been done a lot by other people.
It's one of those ones that's kind of considered part of the Great American Songbook, so I imagine a lot of people have.
The Great American Songbook. Who are we to argue with the Great American Songbook?
I don't know what this must be a very big book.
It's great.
Multiple volumes.
Do you think they haven't just that volume 1 is like 6 foot thick, and then volume 2 is a paperback?
It's all on Kindle. Then we've only got 2 more this year. We've got Eddie Howard with "Sin." It's no sin.
It's no sin. Right.
But "It's no sin" is in brackets. It's "Sin." It's no sin. So that's 2 weeks though.
Russell T Davies will be using that as a title for a thing before you know.
Apparently, it says this is not to be confused by "It's a Sin," but there was not the Pet Shop Boys. It's another song called "It's a Sin." And then the last number one of 1951 in the States was Johnny Ray and the Four Lads.
The Four Lads?
Four Lads, and it's called "Cry."
Cry.
And it was number one for 11 weeks, so a big one.
Is that a bit of a soppy sentimental ballad? Has ballad written on it, so it probably isn't.
It says Ronnie Dove. I don't know Ronnie Dove. Ronnie Dove did a version in 1966. Lynn Anderson, who I at least have heard of, I know her for Rose Garden. She did a version in 1972. But
although the lads, I always think the lads is a very English expression. I can't see the lads as an American term.
Crystal Gale did a version. Tammy Wynette, David Cassidy, Liza Minnelli,
Blimey,
Ray Charles,
we've never heard of it.
Paul Anka. Those are Brenda Lee. Those are just the names that I recognise out of that list. So yes, it's written by Churchill Coleman. But it says it was first recorded by Ruth Casey, but doesn't say how much earlier than this version.
But anyway, he made a few bob out of it. It might do 11 weeks, Okay.
We'll go straight on to 1952 now, but then we'll do 53, and we'll be able to compare.
52, the Queen. We've got the Queen coming onto the crowd. In fact, we this very week, that was 70 years ago.
Yeah, gosh. Our first number one in the States in 52 was "Wheel of Fortune" by Kay Starr. She is...
What if they used it as the theme for Wheel of Fortune?
Kay Starr, her real name is Catherine Laverne Starks, but she's known professionally as Kay Starr.
Kay Starr.
She was an American...
Like K-Tel.
She was an American pop and jazz singer who enjoyed considerable success in the late 40s and 50s. I don't know, Wheel of Fortune, a popular song by Benny Benjamin and George David Weiss, and it was kind of new in 51. But the hit version is, the big hit version is K-Star's version, which got to number 1 for 9 weeks. So
See, my brain is for some reason associating it with the Everleys later, but I'm probably completely wrong about it. It's probably a completely different song, I think.
There are quite a few different versions. Dina Washington, never sure if it's Dina or Dina. That Ronnie Dove that I think I mentioned, he did a version of it.
That Ronnie Dove.
Ronnie Dove, he was basically.
Oh, he's a scamp.
It looks like he was. Oh no, that's weird. Oh, it was an album. He basically, when he was doing his album, he was obviously looking at, I wonder what, I'm going to cover songs from 1951 and nobody will remember them. Because this Wheel of Fortune...
Because that video, they were at least 2 years ago.
His version of Wheel of Fortune was on the album of that previous song, Cry, that he did. So, yeah, he obviously liked that era when he was doing his own work in the mid to late 60s. I don't see a lot of other. There's a lot of other names: Ginny and the Gallons, the Four Flames. They're so obscure.
Every time you think you've come up with the most obscure band name.
Well, it's pretty obscure when on Wikipedia it's a name that's in red, so it doesn't have a full entry. So, yeah. So our next number 1 was Leroy Anderson with Blue Tango.
Blue Tango.
And Leroy Anderson was an American composer of short, light concert pieces, many of which were introduced by the Boston Pops Orchestra under the direction of Arthur Felder.
Fair enough. I feel that Blue Tango would be something that had lots of additives in it.
Yeah.
It's probably not something you should give to small
Probably
children,
raspberry.
quite frankly.
Blue is often connected with raspberry,
yeah.
isn't it?
They would be running around like mad things. The little toddlers would be biting your ankles. They'd be all over the place. They'd be just the sugar rush, and the additives would just be driving them crazy. It's a Blue Tango.
Sounds like you want to. Sounds like you've already had a glass, but
I'm very tempted.
Yeah.
I must there is actually in America, isn't there? There's a big blue drink that they sell over there, and it just looks ghastly. But I imagine it's a staple because you grow up drinking it.
So yeah, it's an instrumental. Amanda Lear, the French singer Amanda Lear, did a version in 1977.
Presumably she added some words.
Yes, I imagine she just lard it. I don't know. It says it's
la 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 la,
like Eek does. Providing it with self-penned lyrics. Who else did it? I don't know any of these people. So, the International Pops Orchestra, Teddy King, the Flea Wreckers. The Flea Wreckers. It's not even spelt like flea. It's flea as in running. It's just too much.
The Flea Musketeers, which was something that sounds suddenly a bit like Michael Bentine's Potty Time.
My brain's hurting. Apparently, Leroy Anderson was described as one of the great American masters of light orchestral music. Next up, we have Al Martino with "Here in My Heart" for 2 weeks. Al Martino, American singer and actor. He had great...
It is funny because, I watch a lot of old telly, a lot of old films, and there are names that pop up as if everybody knows who they are. And that's funny. That name is familiar, and I really don't know why, but it's probably because of something I watched once upon a time. And of course, for a lot of, sad though it may be for people who are in the public eye, 40, 50 years on, people's completely forgotten about you.
Yeah, I do recognise the name Al Martino, but I couldn't have told you any of the songs. But it says he was very successful as a singer from the early 50s to the mid 70s. So.
I get this. It runs into my head that he was like he would guest on the Love Boat or something.
He played the role of Johnny Fortain in The Godfather. So
that's why I know him. Johnny Fontaine. That's why the horse dies.
I've never seen The Godfather, but
what? Stop! Stop! I'll see you in 3 hours.
He I wonder what other songs he had that were famous.
Sorry.
He did have a number 1. Funnily enough, he has a number one in the UK in 1952. Well, considering there's barely a chart for 1952 in the UK. We might find...
Yeah, the fix was in. The Godfather went and saw the chart first.
Yes.
That's what happened to Shergar, mate.
Yeah, he had a few... I Love You Because, one of his hits. I Love You More and More Every Day. He's really trying to...
A lot of these turn up on my dad's Jim Reeves compilations. And even they're the sort of thing that would be done by Val Dudican on a Saturday night.
It's quite... where is he big? Oh, yes. US... What's the US AC chart? Oh, Adult Contemporary. Different from the Billboard.
The AC chart as opposed to the DC chart. Yeah. Yes. Different chart.
Definitely. Next up we have Delicado by Percy Faith. He was a Canadian band leader, orchestrator, composer and conductor, known for lush arrangements of pop and Christmas standards.
Yeah.
He's often credited with popularising the easy listening or mood music format.
Well, somebody had to do it.
That was only number one for 1 week, but it has been covered by other people. Dr. John, Three Sons, Dinah Shaw. It does have lyrics. I mean, these were new tunes at the time. That one wasn't a cover of something that was.
No.
I recognise the next one. For 9 weeks, we're in the summer of 52. We have Vera Lynn with Alvida saying "Sweetheart."
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you know that one particularly?
Oh no, I don't know that song. I mean, I knew Vera Lynn.
The name,
but,
right? Okay.
No.
I thought you had in the back of your cupboard you had a Vera's greatest hits or something.
Well, I might do, but
underneath the bunting for whenever there's a St George's Day parade.
Actually, funnily enough, some of the records I bought when I bought them from like Discogs or from proper vinyl, like not just from eBay, they were coming from proper, but they would to pack the stuff they were sending. Sometimes they put albums to like as packaging, so I'd get my Archie's album, and then there'd be there'd be like really weird albums, or like ones that I wouldn't actually.
What, the actual LP?
Yeah, because they obviously
the sleeve.
I think the albums are in some cases, I think sometimes it's the sleeve, just the sleeve, and sometimes it might be on sort of albums where it's been damaged, but they've kept the packaging for packaging reasons. But I'm sure I've received a few albums where there were actual albums in these sleeves, because they're presumably not sellable, or they're scratched, but I haven't had the heart to throw them away because I want to look a bit more into them as to what on earth
Have you actually played
Not
any?
Yet, but I've kept them because I will do at some point.
That's the soundtrack to a future edition
you just
of the Shy Life
because
podcast.
it could have something wonderful, and I couldn't possibly get rid of it as it's come into my house. It could be,
You're not another hoarder, are you?
Not in a bad way, but I'm a bit hoardy. But
not in a was it carnivorous?
Well,
slug
there's hoarding where people have like pizza boxes and newspapers, like to the point where they can't get into their house, and there are people who keep things that they kind of.
Mine's physical media.
Yeah, physical.
Surrounded by physical media.
I'm surrounded by physical media, but they're not. They have some potential use. Theoretically, yes, but it's not pizza boxes. So those are the people I think of as or people who've kept leads from computers that have long since died, or that's hoarding. And
oh no! Don't tell me that.
No. Well, okay. When it's like in the
my
middle.
problem is I can never actually tell what lead it is, so I thought, better hang on to it because I might need it for something.
I'm thinking of it,
even though it's possibly from some phone I've not used in 10 years.
I'm thinking of those ones where the people have kept newspapers so much, and it's like a tunnel to get into the living room through the maze of.
It's not quite that.
No, that's right.
Towers. It's getting there, but.
This is weird. I better read this bit. Currently, Auf Wiedersehen, Sweetheart is tied with Hey Jude for third amongst longest-running number one songs by British artists, behind Candle in the Wind. And We Find Love by Rihanna and Calvin Harris. I guess it's British act that stayed in number one very long time in America makes it a part of the record.
Fair enough.
Apparently, the song was written in hospital for his wife Maria, who and whilst he was ill, the guy who wrote it, don't know, a Storch. What is it? It doesn't say his. It's not the person. Obviously, it's not the person who sung it. It doesn't say who Storch is. Oh no, Eberhard Storch.
Blimey, that's an
a German composer. Apparently, there's a famous Demis Roussos version. He covered it in 1974. Oh, as did Connie Francis, Teddy Johnson, Jim Reeves, Mantovani. But
basically, if you were anybody, you covered it.
Vera Lynn got there first.
Of course.
And yeah, that was number one for 9 weeks.
First onto the beaches.
Next up, we have Jo Stafford.
Okay.
She's an American traditional pop music singer and occasional actress whose career spanned 5 decades, from the late 30s to the early 80s. Mm-hmm. So she was pretty well established. She must, 20-year career. She already had a
lengthy career, isn't it?
The song is "You Belong to Me," number one for 5 weeks.
You belong to me.
I don't know.
Everybody tells me so.
Well, it's a ballad. It could be. Let me see who else covered it.
I think I'm thinking of Urban Hermits there.
Oh yeah. Well, unless they.
But I suspect it's a different one.
Bingo Star did a version in 1981. Vic Astley did a version.
No.
Tori Amos did a version.
No.
Where are we going to find? I wouldn't. Looking to see whether it must be a different one from Herman Hermits.
I would imagine so.
And they did do some funny things like "I'm Henry VIII, I Am." I don't know whether that was. I don't know whether that was a cover at the time or whether that was written in that style. Anyway, moving on, we have Patti Page. I went to the song is "I Went to Your Wedding." It's written.
Wow. Well, that sounds dull, doesn't it? I went to the chip shop.
I remember you did bring a. I haven't got.
The buffet was rubbish.
I can't even click on Patti Page. She doesn't have a page. Patti Page doesn't have a page. There's no Patti Page page.
Well, that's shocking. We must rectify this at once. If I've only had the access codes. It's funny. The name is familiar. Weirdly, I don't know why particularly.
Alma Cogan did a version.
Alma.
Oh, I bet John Lennon liked that. He liked Alma Cogan. What else was I going to say about it? It was written by Jessie Mae Robinson, and it was like a new song at the time. Not much else about that song. Then we have Johnny Standley. It's in the book, parts 1 and 2, only for 1 week.
Right.
It's
in the book.
Yeah, Johnny Standley was an American musician, actor, and comedian.
Don't get me wrong, but there's not much in the way of inspiring titles here, really. I went to your wedding. It's in the book. It's just yeah. Oh yeah, mate. Yeah. It's not exactly rock and roll, is it?
It's a recorded comic monologue, partly sung, partly an exhortation in the manner of a revivalist preacher on the subject of Little Bo Peep.
Well, there you go.
Comedy was different back in those days.
It is, yes, indeed.
The idea of what was funny. We'll probably listen to it, and again, we won't be rolling in the aisles if we actually heard it.
Well, I'm not sure. I think in some ways modern comedians are even worse. Yeah. So maybe a bit more of that wouldn't be the worst at the moment.
Now, the next one is Joni James, an American singer of traditional pop music.
Did she grow up to be Joni Jett?
I don't think she did. Her real name is Giovanni Carmela Babbo.
Blimey. Wow.
I don't...
Okay.
She's still alive. She's 91.
Crikey. At time of recording.
But she hasn't... she hasn't... her career stopped... Well, her music career stopped in 1964, so...
So she's had a long retirement.
She had a number 11 hit in 1952 in the UK with "Why Don't You Believe Me," which
Well, because I don't believe you, Paul. That's why I don't believe she had a number 11 hit in 1954. I absolutely, completely refuse to believe it.
actually that's then she had between 1953 and 1954, all of her singles were around. I've never seen so many 22s and 23s in a row.
Well, maybe that's it. She found her niche. There was so many people would buy it, and no more.
Actually, her later singles did even worse. So maybe she just gave up and had a family or something.
You never know. You never know what. She might have been serving chips to you on the M1, and you'd never know.
And I guess "Why Don't You Believe Me" is the song we're talking about. So it was a hit in the UK as well, just not as big a hit. Patti Page did a version. I'm beginning. It's all too much.
Maybe they're the same person.
Yes,
it's an alter.
That's why there's
ego.
no Page for it.
Secret identity.
Pat Boone. Loads of people did a version of this song.
Patty Boone, Page.
This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I got all excited when I saw that it was Patrick Whitney's 100th anniversary.
Yes.
And then the next day it was Hattie Jakes' 100th.
No.
I didn't realise that they were similar. They were almost the same age. This song Brenda Lee did a version. Pat Boone, Bing Crosby, lots of other people that I don't recognise. Dean Martin, I recognise him. Now the last number one, that was "You Don't Believe Me" was number one for 4 weeks, and this must be. We'll just read the last one, and then we'll skip over to the only number one that was recorded in the UK in 1952.
For the entire year, it's the Coronation theme.
Coronation Street, no, too early for Coronation Street. You don't say that often. The last number one was "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus" for 2 weeks.
I saw Mommy kissing Santa.
And that was by Jimmy Boyd. And he was.
Is that the recognised version? Because again, that's one of those songs that everybody seems to have done, isn't it?
It does say he is a singer, musician, and actor best known for his recording of. So I imagine it must be. Although it does say. It does say one of the other surviving versions from the same time was by our friend Betty White on the Betty White Show.
Crikey!
From in the mid 50s.
Again, yeah, it sort of boggles the mind that her career was that long as well. It messes with your head sometimes that people. You can be watching as adults in stuff in the 50s and 60s. We're rattling along well into the sort of 21st century.
Now, Jimmy Boyd was married to somebody you'll recognise the name of.
Okay, no challenge.
But he was married. He was married to her before. Well, she may have been famous, but she wasn't famous for the role that I know her for. He was married to Yvonne Craig.
Oh, Batgirl.
TV's Batgirl. But they were divorced by 62, so this was before.
You see, Yvonne Craig surely can't have been old enough to have been married and divorced.
By 62.
That's astonishing.
I've got her. Yvonne Craig was born in 1937, 47. So she was about 30 when she did Batgirl.
Mind you, when you think about it, was her name Caroline Ford had a child, didn't she? By the time she was when she was being Susan
in Doctor Who, yes.
So it's kind of a bit of a. It's always sort of doesn't compute.
Yeah, I think she'd been acting certainly from the late 50s. So, yes.
Fair enough.
Right, let's just jump over, and then we'll just do 1953 more in a more normal way, because we actually have comparable
songs. Actually, we have to do it on a different kind of instrument. Blink, 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 blink.
So literally, and it won't take long to discuss this, the only number one... I'm confused. But anyway, the only number one we have... recorded for 1952 is by Al Martino, and it's "Here in My Heart" for 9 weeks.
Okay.
I'm just trying to work out why they started.
It was a different time, wasn't it?
Just trying to work out why they started an album chart right at the end of the year.
We'll try it out this year, and if it works, we'll do it again next year.
Now it says... Oh no, that's in 1950s. I'm just trying to see if there's anything that says why the chart began.
Why it began.
Record charts in the UK began life in 1952 when Percy Dickens from the NME imitated an idea started in the American Billboard magazine and began compiling a hit parade. Prior to this,
there you go.
Yeah, prior to this, the song's popularity was measured by terms of sheet music. Initially, Dickens telephoned a sample of around 20 shops asking for a list of the 10 best-selling songs. These results were then aggregated to give a top 12 chart published in NME on the 14th of November 1952, and the number one single for the rest of the year was Here in My Heart.
This is it, Paul. We could start a top 10 something or other based on people we know.
Yeah, we'll just have a podcast list, and it'll just be people that go, did you download his podcast this week? Oh, yes, I did. Oh, no, I didn't. I skipped it this week.
That's it. Because basically that's what you said. You say 6 shops or
12, I think.
12 shops. Yeah. It's like it's not exactly the biggest sample, is it? No. Let's be honest. So great ideas do grow.
It's probably about the only way we're going to beat any of those multi-million downloading podcasts if we don't even include them because nobody downloads them.
No.
So,
well, I think if you changed your name to David Tennant,
yeah, we could do that. As we've come over to the UK, we'll stay here because I'm not coming over just for one song.
Yeah, it's grim, it's grey, yeah. It's austere. So, it's raining probably. We're all wearing clothes that suit sort of people 30 years older than us. It's Britain in the 50s. It's 1953. It's the year of Quatermass.
I've just realised that Ick is going to struggle to sing a lot of these songs because I don't know. I mean, because
yeah, they didn't have space, did they? They didn't have space back then. Those songs just didn't make it out into space.
Maybe you can sing 1 or 2 songs at the end.
It's before Sputnik. Yeah. Before Sputnik was transmitting them on. You see.
So we'll stay in. We'll stay in the UK for 53, and that means that
we should get Uncle John to do it instead.
Yeah. Our first number one is that Joe Stafford with "You Belong to Me," but only for 1 week. Then we have K Star, and we've had K Star in America in 52, yes. But I think with a different song,
so to speak.
Yeah, this is Comes Along a Love.
Right, Comes Along a Love.
Yeah, it was written by the
Ramalama Ding Dong.
It was written by Tin Pan Alley songwriter Al Sherman, and it was adapted from the final part of the overture to Rossini's opera Semiramide.
If it can't, a bit of Rossini.
Semiramide. That sounds horrible. That was only number one.
Sounds like Star Trek.
Yeah, that was only for 1 week too. Then we have Eddie Fisher. Eddie Fisher, who was
Carrie's dad.
Yeah, married to Debbie Reynolds. Yes, actually, was he married to Elizabeth Taylor as well? Oh no, he was. Fisher divorced his first wife, Debbie Reynolds, to marry. Yes, he did marry Elizabeth Taylor. I thought so. I read her autobiography. I've read both their I've read autobiographies involving both of those. Outside of Heaven, it was originally written by Sammy Gallup and Chester Conn, but I think Eddie Fisher's version was the first famous version. It's interesting to see some of these record labels. They're all really well-known names like Columbia and HMV, Decca, Philips.
The fix was in, mate. Yeah. That's what it was.
After that, we have Perry Como with "Don't Let the Stars Get in Your Eyes" for 5 weeks.
You think if because he had a good head of hair, didn't he? He wasn't a pericomo. He was. Do we feel it was a convincing head of hair?
I'll have to have a look. I don't think I'd seen many pictures of him at this age before. But a lot of people covered this. Dean Martin again, Slim Whitman, Jerry Lee Lewis,
Slim,
Katie Lang.
Do you think why? I suppose Slim is a nickname like anybody else, but does that mean there was a portly Whitman as well?
Yeah, or Fats even. We got Fats Dumpling. So.
Yes, I suppose so. Gosh, they didn't care in those days, did they? Once you had a nickname, it was stuck with it. I mean, you could lose 40 pounds, you'd still be fine.
Well, I'm only occasionally shy, but I've become Shy Yeti the last 20 years.
That's a choice, though.
No, it was forced on me by my fans. Next we have Guy Mitchell.
Okay, before you were Shy Yeti, were you known as just Yeti then? Was that?
Yeah. No, I wasn't. It's a long story. It's all to do with Doctor Who forums when there were first forums around. Our next number one is Guy Mitchell, American pop star and actor.
Guy Mitchell?
We'll probably get some of these. We'll probably find.
I don't know. I think again, that's one of those names that comes round again. But I think of him as a television presenter, Guy Mitchell. I don't know why. Probably another one.
He was an American pop star and actor, successful in the States, the UK, and Australia. He starred in the ABC's The Guy Mitchell Show in the late 50s, and he appeared as George Romack on the NBC Western detective series Whispering Smith.
Fair enough.
I don't know what else he did. He died in 1999, age 72. I didn't even tell you what the song was by him. Guy Mitchell's song was "She Wears Red Feathers," which was written by Bob Merrill, but looks like it was relatively new at the time. 4 weeks. Then we have the Stargazers, Broken Wick.
The Stargazers,
yes.
They're going to be busy later in the decade.
They were a British vocal group founded in 1949 by Cliff Adams and Ronnie Milne. I wonder if just check there's nobody famous in somebody who's even more famous in them. Somebody very shortly after the group made their first broadcast with BBC Radio on such programmes as Workers' Playtime and The Goon Show, Dick James decided to resume his career as a solo vocalist.
Wow. So, everything's connected. You'll end up on the Goon Pod. With that sort of factoid.
Yes. But I'm just repeating bits out of Wikipedia, really, but never mind. I'm not sure it's knowledge. The song,
it is now.
I might remember some of it. I'll start dreaming about it. The song is, I think I said, the song is Broken Wings. Only 1 week.
It's funny how these titles come around, isn't it?
The next song is, How Much Is That Doggy in the Window, which I think a different version of it had been number one in the States earlier in the decade. Only for 1 week, by Lita Reza.
Right. As opposed to that, How Much Is That Dogger in the Window, which is a completely different song.
It's only written in 52, so maybe I'm being unkind. Maybe this is the first version.
Wow.
But maybe that we're going to come across it in the States as well. Patti Page.
Again.
Patti Page did a version.
Right.
Patti Page does have a page. It's just that in that somebody hadn't bothered to link it in that previous. Patti Page lived till 2013. She was 85. Anyway.
The name was very familiar. It was surprised that there was nothing, so that's good.
Yeah.
We'll look her up later.
Yeah, she does seem to have done a lot of things like throughout the decades as well. She had discography. I don't think we've got. Sorry, Patty. I don't think. Well, at least we know you have a page, Patty.
We'll come back and look at the Patty Page another time.
Yes. Then we have Frankie Lane. With I Believe.
Frankie Lane. As opposed to Bryan Street.
Yes. He's He's an American singer, so we'll probably come across him again. And I believe was a very big hit.
Yes.
And it wasn't number one for just 1 week. It was number one for...
For every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows. Is it that one?
I'm not sure. It was number... well, it appears 3 times. It was... So it has periods, then something else comes number one, then it comes back again.
See, I'm thinking of a Harry Seacombe version. I don't know why. I'm feeling that's a Harry Seacombe standard.
It was basically number one for 18 weeks, but not all in...
Bloody hell.
But not consecutively.
I mean, I got bored of that one from the weddings.
I mean, I think Bryan Adams and Whitney Houston's long-running songs weren't anywhere near as long as 18 weeks. They were in the early teens.
Bloody hell. Yeah.
Let me see.
They're still popular, you know? So that basically takes us through to September.
Something like that, yeah. I'm just trying to see. Pat Boone did it. Tom Jones did it. Elvis Presley did it. Rapparata and the Delrons did it. I like Rapparata and the Delrons.
Well, yeah.
But Barbara Streisand.
I demand to... I want to know why Harry Seacombe isn't listed. I know he did that on Stars on Sunday for about 16 weeks.
Well, it was number one for 9 weeks on its first appearance. Then Eddie Fisher showed up again.
Eddie
with
good old.
I'm walking behind you. So you're basically stalking me then.
That's sinister. It's late at night. You hear the footfalls behind you.
Yeah. Only for 1 week, but then, you know.
Well, you got arrested, obviously.
Then Frankie Lane with I Believe again for 6 weeks.
God.
Then
people really like that, didn't they?
Yeah. And then Mantovani with the song from Moulin Rouge.
Okay.
Which, I think
presumably is not the Nicole Kidman.
It's from the It's from. It says it's also called It's April Again, but I don't know. But anyway, yes, it was from a film version of Moulin Rouge from 1952.
As opposed to It's Frankie Again.
Yeah. Well, it is actually Frankie Again. It's Frankie Lane again with I Believe for 3 more weeks.
Bloody hell! Is that so? Is the 18 weeks? Is that 18 plus the 6 plus the 3, or
no,
is that
it's 9 plus 6 plus 3?
9 plus 6 plus 3. Okay. So he actually had a nice mathematical progression, 963 as well. That was the 3 times table going backwards. Wow! Tell you couldn't plan that, could you?
Then we have Guy Mitchell again with Look at That Girl for 6 weeks. That was also written by Bob Merrill, which wrote.
Who's that girl running around with you? Not that one. Tell me.
Bob Merrill seems like he wrote Guy Mitchell's other hit this year.
I think I was thinking of Guy Mitchell Moore earlier, weirdly, as the UK TV presenter. the son of Cliff, presumably. But not that Cliff. The other Cliff.
Cliff Mitchell Moore.
Holiday Cliff.
Yeah.
Oh no! Don't go to the cliff on a holiday. No, it's all getting confused in my head. I can't stand the confusion in my mind.
So that was for 6 weeks. Then we just have 4 more left in the UK. Well, actually, oh dear, it gets more confusing. Then we have.
Oh, is Frankie back?
Yeah, Frankie's back, but with a different song. He's with Hey Joe for 2 weeks.
Hey Joe,
but it's not. But it's not, I don't think it's Hey Joe that. Don't think it's Hey Joe that. Jimi Hendrix did, and the Byrds did, and lots of other people did. I don't think it is because it doesn't mention those names. So
no,
it's a different Joe.
Hey Joe, don't bother me. Hey Joe, not that one. Is it?
I don't know. It wasn't half as big a hit.
It'll be on one of those free LPs you got through.
It wasn't half as big a hit as I Believe, anyway. But now
I Believe in Joe.
Now we have. Next number one is David Whitfield, Answer Me, for 1 week. Now, I remember David Whitfield was a popular British male tenor vocalist from Hull. And he says he became the first British artist to have a UK number one single in the UK and in the United States with Cara Mia.
There you go. Cara Mia.
So the song is Answer Me, and we'll look more into the song in a minute because I just need to read the other two, as you'll soon see. So David Whitfield's version of Answer Me was number one for 1 week. Then Frankie Lane did a version of Answer Me.
Frankie Lane.
He did a version of Answer Me, and that was number one for 8 weeks.
So that's the answer to Answer Me.
Yeah, but then...
There's an answer. It's like a battle of the bands, isn't it?
It is. And then the last number one of 1953 in the UK was David Whitfield's version of Answer Me again. So look,
That's
so I think
madness.
I think I need to look a bit into the actual song. It was originally titled Mutterlein it was with German lyrics. Okay. And that was originally published in 1952, but then the English lyrics were written and English language version was done in late 53.
That's bizarre, though.
So Frankie Lane and David Whitfield.
Is it just that people kept sort of going to the shop? No, I didn't mean that version.
Yeah. Well, David Whitfield's version was certainly a lot less popular than the Frankie Lane version, but I think my dad likes David Whitfield, I thought it was certainly a name I recognise.
It's the power of the brand, isn't it? It's the power of the brand.
Now, other people that did Answer Me include The Bachelors, Petula Clark, Nat King Cole, Harry Connick Jr., Bing Crosby, Barbara Dixon, Engelbert Humperdinck.
Gentlemen, Barbara Dixon.
Engelbert Humperdinck, Joni Mitchell, yes. Gene Pitney, PJ Proby, Ray Stevens, Brian Ferry, Roy Orbison, Will Young, and that's and there are other people I'm leaving out.
And that's just the A side.
Yes, there are people I'm leaving out that are less famous.
Yes, we don't care about them. We're very, you know, we like our proper stars here on the old Shy Life, don't we? We don't know these also rans. Forget about them.
People who've appeared as singing guests on Little and Large and things like that. No disrespect to Barbara Dixon, who I actually really like. But now let's go over to America and see what's going on over it.
What they're getting up to.
Now they've got a lot less number ones.
Okay.
But I think we're going to rattle through them because most of them, well, a lot of them are what we've heard in the UK. But first number one in the States in 1953 is "Don't Let the Stars Get in Your Eyes" by Perry Como.
Ow. Well, it would be painful. Yeah. Wouldn't it? It really would be painful.
Yeah, and that's for 5 weeks. Then we have one we haven't seen before, Teresa Brewer, Till I Waltz Again with You. It's a popular song written by Sid Prosen. Now, Teresa Brewer doesn't actually have a link.
Which chart is this? Because it sounds the waltz with you. I mean, it sounds very middle of the road, sort of popular, you know, kind of.
It's the only chart. It's the only chart I can find for 1953 in America. But
fair enough. The Billboard. Again, I suppose. But then again, you think about something like Eurovision. You know, the early songs are very much of that ilk, can't they? You know, they're sort of homespun.
It says rather than a waltz, as the title suggests, it is a slow AABA shuffle. I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
It'll be to do with feet.
Almost APA, but with too many A's. Alma Cogan did a version of it. Elvis Presley did a version. Doesn't tell me. Oh, here we are. Teresa Brewer does have a link. It's another one of those articles where the main this list hasn't given her a link, but if you look further, there are links. She was an American singer whose style incorporated pop, country, jazz, R&B musicals and novelty songs. She was one of the most popular female singers of the 1950s, recording nearly 600 songs. She lived 600. She lived until 2007, aged 70.
In the same week.
One of Elvis Presley's first public singing experiences in 12th grade was performing a song of Brewer's, "Till I Waltz Again with You."
Wow, there you go. Great Oaks again.
She did have later in the. We might see her again. I don't think she's. I don't have so much information about other things that weren't number one, but were big hits. I don't have as much information on that. But she didn't have any number ones in the UK, but she did have like top 3 hits later in the decade in the UK. So after Teresa Brewer, we had Patti Page with The Doggy in the Window. No, just a minute. Who was having The Doggy in the Window in the UK? That was somebody else, wasn't it? It's
such a staple, though, isn't it? You know, and yet you kind of still can't imagine it's as a chart topper. It just feels like one of those songs that your dad sang when you were trying to get to sleep, or you on a long car journey, or it would sort of turn up with the Mike Sammy singers doing it on some children's record. Yeah, it really doesn't feel like a bona fide chart smash hit, does it?
The version that was number one in the UK was by Lita Rosa, so it's one of those cases where there are lots of people.
Lita Rosa.
Oh, I forgot to say how long. So Perry Como was number one for 5 weeks. Teresa Brewer was number one for 5 weeks, and Patti Page's version of the Doggy in the Window was number one for 8 weeks.
Good 8 weeks at the top of the chart, all across America. That's the song they were buying. It boggles the mind, doesn't it?
Yeah. Then we have Percy Faith with that song from Moulin Rouge. Which here is called "Where Is Your Heart."
Okay.
Oh no! Then when you click on it, it says it's April again. Oh, I don't know. That was number one for 10 weeks in the States.
Right.
Then we have Eddie Fisher with "I'm Walking Behind You" again, and he manages an extra week. He
obviously they're more happier with stalking in America, but equally maybe there's a whole East Coast West Coast thing. He was following somebody on the East Coast, then he flew over to the West Coast.
Well, he had number one for 2 weeks with that in the States, whereas he just had the 1 week in the UK. Yeah. Then we have
we kicked him out of the country with a flea in his ear and said go over to America and stalk people over there on both sides of the continent.
Well, our next number one is just about our longest running number one in the States in 1953. Okay. It's Les Paul and Mary Ford with Vea con Dios, May God Be With You. A popular song written by Larry Russell, Inez James and Buddy Pepper, and first recorded by Anita O'Day in December 1952.
That's Spanish influence, isn't it, in American culture very much, embracing it in that era.
It was number one for 11 weeks. So,
wow.
We only have 2 left. In October, we have Stan Freberg. Now, it says Stan Freberg was actor, author, comedian, musician, radio personality, puppeteer, and advertising creative director.
Blimey, Charlie, that's what you call a varied career, isn't it? Was he no good at any of them, or was he just brilliant at all of them?
He's known for a TV show called Time for Beanie. He does multiple characters on Looney Tunes, such as Pete Puma. I don't know Pete Puma, I don't think.
Sounds to me like a Pepe Le Pew ripoff.
And Bertie, Hubie and Bertie, and a number of classic. Trying to see if he's got connections with doing a version of the Jabberwocky. Trying to see something that we might better go. Time for Beanie is where he did voices and puppeteered.
Right. Wasn't just
so you might
a woolly hat.
So you wouldn't necessarily recognise him from it if you didn't,
No. Mind you, there's a lot of those popular shows. I mean, funnily enough, they get referenced in things like Tarantino films that we weren't really aware of. Captain Kangaroo and all that kind of thing. They were big over there and they shaped a generation, but of course they weren't. They didn't cross-pollinate. They didn't make it.
Well, that's the thing. I was talking to somebody about Tarantino the other day, and he uses quite a lot of music from relatively obscure, like Italian giallos and things like that, which you'd have to even be. So you might just think, "Oh, this is a good bit of music," without realising it was from another film from 50 years ago, sort of thing. But I mean, that's what he likes to do. So if you know much about him, then
that's why you need to listen to those LPs they sent you by accident.
When I am in Tarantino's place, I'll play some really obscure.
Absolutely, I say I'm gonna pick this obscure virulence and make it huge.
I'm going to be going, oh, that's so cool. When did you discover that? And I'm like, there's a story behind this. Well, Stan Freberg's song was called St. George and the Dragonette.
Ah.
Okay. It says it's a short audio satire.
I suspect it's sexist in some way.
It's a spoof combining the tale of St. George and the Dragon with Dragnet, which was a radio series at the time. So it sounds like a bit of a mess, but it's probably.
It was probably hilarious.
Hilarious.
It was probably utterly hilarious.
Yeah. Anyway, interesting.
You forget the influence of radio back then, of course. I mean, telly hasn't taken off yet in quite the way it will. So yes, it's you forget radio comedy and radio those kind of light sort of entertainment things would have had a lot of power.
There's lots of mentions of maidens. Anyway, the last,
of course, there is.
Yes, that was for number 1 for 4 weeks. Then the last number 1 was Tony Bennett.
Tony
with Rags to Riches for 6 weeks. Now it says this was a popular song by Richard Adler and Jerry Ross.
Adler and Ross.
I think that Elvis did a version in the 70s. Yes, there's not a lot about this one, but it looks like Elvis did a version in 1971.
Okay. It hung about then. It had reach. Its tentacles went in a couple of decades down the line.
So that's kind of it for what we're going to cover for this episode. What I'm thinking we'll do in future episodes is we'll do 2 years, like we did with the early 60s stuff. And because we haven't got so much information, we'll do 54 and 55, then we'll do 56, 57, then 58, 59, and then we'll have to think of something new to talk about.
The loop will be closed again.
Yes, and then we'll probably do some of our talking about
popular sheet music of the 1930s.
Well, I thought what we could do, because you missed out talking about some of those later 70s groups, we could talk about some of the groups that were big in that period, so we get to talk about that. So we'll talk.
Yes, your audience needs to know my total ignorance on so many things. Yes, quite right.
People want to hear what your thoughts are.
I'm sure they don't, but yes,
they're going to. All I can.
You don't get away with it that easily, Holmes.
I won't give away too much, but we haven't seen the last of Eddie Fisher. Rosemary Clooney's name comes up more than once.
She was a big star, Rosemary Clooney. People forget that because obviously of George, but she was huge.
Perry Como, Doris Day, and some of these names. We haven't seen the last of David Whitfield either. Frank Sinatra. Vera Lynn, I can see Vera Lynn is back, and Winifred Atwell as well.
There you go.
But anyway, we'll save that till next time.
Indeed.
We'll hopefully coming up at the end of the episode, we'll have Ick at least attempting. I mean, he can do How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? Surely, I mean,
probably the full version, and indeed might even know all the words.
Probably out of copyright by now. Nobody tried to charge my gram, and she used to sing it to me. So
precisely.
Anyway, Martin, thanks very much.
Always a pleasure.
And we'll speak to you again soon.
Okay, you take care. Bye-bye.
Hi listeners, it's me, Paul again. I'm afraid that we don't have our usual ick musical segment because he maintains that the songs are far too obscure for him. Now, a lot of them are available on YouTube, probably on Spotify or, musical apps. But, I guess, we had a little bit of an argument, to be honest. It was a little bit as I suspected. I'm afraid I did say so to Martin, but there's a little recording of what we did record before we had the argument. Have a listen.
Paul, I do know some songs from the early 1950s. I don't know what you're talking about. I know this one. How much is that dog in the window? The one with the waggly tail, waggle, waggle, waggle. How much is that dog in the window? I do hope that dog is for sale. Yes.
Well, that's not the whole song. Surely there's a verse or...
No, Paul, it's just that. How much is that dog in the window? The one with the waggly tail, woof, woof.
Oh, well, that's all very well. But there are other songs.
Okay. I'm walking behind you. Yes, I am.
That's just... You just said the title, that's all you did. There's no resemblance to the actual song.
Don't be silly. Don't be silly, Paul. Be quiet. The next song is it's called The Song from Moulin Rouge.
Oh, right. By Mantovani.
Yes, Paul. How much is that dog in the window? Woof, woof. The one with the waggly tail. Meow, meow.
Ick? That's not the song from Moulin Rouge. That's How Much Is That Doggy in the Window again.
No, Paul. It's the song from Moulin Rouge. You don't know what the song from Moulin Rouge is. Well, it's actually How Much Is That Doggy in the Window. That is the song from Moulin Rouge.
I'm not so sure about that. Try something else, for goodness sake.
Oh, dear. Right. Oh, here we go. This is very early, 1950. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, woof, woof, has a very shiny nose, meow. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you have thought you might even say it glows. What's wrong now? I got that right.
Yes, you don't have to do the woof woof bit.
You just can't be pleased, can you? I'm going to sing this one. If I knew you were coming, I'd bake a cake, bake a cake, bake a cake. If I knew you were coming, I'd bake a cake. La 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 la.
That's just the chorus. What about the verse?
No, that's all it is. If I knew you were coming, I'd bake a cake, bake a cake, bake a cake. If I knew you were coming, I'd bake a cake.
Yeah, all right. That's enough.
Oh, what about this Rosemary Clooney classic? Come on to my house, come on to my house, come on house, my house, yes.
Again, that's just a snatch of the song.
What about this one? If a picture paints 1,000 words, then I can you. I woody-doody-doo, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
Ick, that's not the right If. That's a different song. You're not singing If by Perry Como. You're singing If by Bread.
Oh, all right. When I look back upon my life, it's always with a sense of shame. I've never been the one to blame. It's a sin.
Ick, you're just taking the mickey now. There's a song called Sin in 1951, but it's not It's a Sin. It's No Sin, actually.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Come on, the listeners deserve more.
They Yes, I saw Mommy kissing Santa Claus, but I can't remember the tune. Oh, look, there's this one by Patti Page. How much is the dog in the window? Woof, woof. The one with the waggly tail. Meow, meow.
Ick, just because two singers sung How Much Is That Doggy in the Window doesn't mean to say you can sing it twice, just because it's the only song you actually know more than two notes of.
But how dare you? But that's it. That's it. I quit, Paul. I won't be singing any more of your songs for you. Goodbye.
Such a drama queen. Oh dear, sorry listeners. Ick and the songs of the early 1950s do not go well together. Well, I suppose I'm going to have to sing you a song before we go. Right, what shall I sing? Oh yes, there's this one. How much is that doggy in the window? Woof, woof. The one with the waggly tail. Meow, meow.
You're unbelievable. Whew.
I gotta go now.
I don't care.
Bye.
I want to go with you.
Gotta go. Bye.
Goodbye, 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 goodbye.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Oh dear. What's going on now?
Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast. Let's go.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice.
We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
Hello listeners, we're back again. Just very briefly, because how long did it take us to record this episode, Martin? About
4 months.
4 months. No, about a month. But I mean, obviously, we weren't trying every day. We just had 2 recording sessions. Where the first half of the episode, or the first bit of the episode, was recorded at my parents', and the internet was being a bit funny. So I salvaged what I could, and then we continued onward. Much more,
and it'll be totally seamless in the edit.
Except we're giving it away now by telling you. But
this is what Shy Life Unplugged.
Yeah. So yes, it's a bit of insight. It's done now anyway, but hopefully
it worked anyway. That's the point. I mean, it'll be fascinating for me to hear it, because I can't remember a thing I said a month ago, and I'm not sure I can remember much I said this afternoon. Quite frankly, so it's always fun to hear it back and go, oh yes, yes. Who is that? Oh, it's me. Yes.
I keep when I do editing, I keep thinking. And I then go and look and explore a song that we've said, I don't know what that is. And I'm always sort of have to hold back how many links I send you, because he doesn't want to hear all these links. So.
But you've got, there's 500 shows in the bank now. I mean, if you ever wanted to do a compilation, it would take you about a year just to listen to it again.
Well, I have I've considered doing like a show book or whatever, but.
The guide to the Shy Life.
Yeah, well, in the same way as I always wanted to do something similar for Sutton Park, but it's just too much for it. If I was at the stage where I wasn't creating stuff anymore, for want of a word,
it's something to do in your retirement, isn't it, Paul?
But is that ever going to come? Am I ever going to stop making things?
Old podcasters never die.
They just get chewed up in the tape recorder. Oh dear.
Wow, I love that one. Great show, Paul. Yeah, that was a good shoe. Oh, kitty, kitty, kitty. Purr, kitty, kitty, kitty. Oh, I love Dee. This is just the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
As long as I can.
I don't think you delete anything. I think it's all there on a hard drive somewhere. Every single.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there's still, even if I don't use it on the show, it's still on the all the
waiting to drop.
All the cops
years down the line, you become Prime Minister and Paul's plotted in its file.
How dare you? I'd never be Prime Minister.
No, or neither would I. No, I do. I've got far too much integrity. Sorry.
Exactly.